Welcome to the Resilient Retail Game Plan, a podcast for anyone wanting to start, grow or scale a profitable creative product business with me, Catherine Eardley. The Resilient Retail Game Plan is a podcast dedicated to one thing, breaking down the concepts and tools that I've gathered from 20 years in the retail industry and showing you how you can use them in your business. This is the real nuts and bolts of running a successful product business, broken down in an easy, accessible way. This is not a podcast about learning how to make your business look good. It's the tools and techniques that will make you and your business feel good. Confidently plan, launch and manage your products, and feel in control of your sales numbers and cash flow to help you build a resilient retail business. Welcome back to episode 2 of the Resilient Retail Game Plan. My name's Catherine Eardley and I'm your host, as well as the founder of the Resilient Retail Club. The Resilient Retail Club is my membership group for creative product businesses, and you can find out more at resilientretail.com. This episode is all about the history of the retail industry, and I wanted to highlight why you as a creative product business are not separate from this industry, but are an important part of the story. The news at the moment is full of stories about large high street retailers in trouble. Just recently, for example, Monsoon Accessorize, Cath Kidston, Oasis, Warehouse, and Debenhams, to name just a few. If you own a retail business or you're planning to start one, this might worry you. Is now really the time to be going into an industry that's in so much turmoil? But let's be clear though, retail is not in trouble. Boring retail is in trouble. Be honest, how surprised were you when you heard about Debenhams? And no, if you've heard the term retail apocalypse, I definitely disagree with that. What we're seeing right now is not an apocalypse, but it is part of a revolution. Let's go back in time. What we're going through now is actually part of a new cycle. The current problems that big retailers are facing right now are just part of a new cycle for the industry. And you don't have to look back that far to see that the current structure we have of having big chains just simply didn't exist before the 1950s. If we go back in time, we can understand the structural shift that has been going on in the retail industry for about the last 70 years. So in 1947, for example, if we go all the way back then, there were only 10 self-service retailers in the UK. That means that every other business was a business where people were serving you. So you would have to go to the counter and ask to get things from behind the counter being served by a shop assistant. All of that changed when rationing ended in 1954. There was a huge explosion in the number of self-service businesses. And by 1969, there were 3,400 supermarkets alone. So you had gone from 1947 with only 10 self-service retailers to 1969 with over 3,400 just looking at supermarkets. And this really gave birth to the modern chain store, or large groups of stores which were essentially industrializing the retail industry. So prior to the 1950s, most retail was done in small independent businesses. However, with these self-service and these big chains, many customers were happy to buy standardized products at low prices. There was a huge boom in businesses being able to buy goods cheaply from China and then have them shipped to the UK at rock bottom prices. So this growth of standardized, industrialized retail, if you like, forced many smaller independent stores to close. This trend carried on throughout not just the 1950s, the 1960s, the 1970s, and into the 1980s, when there was this huge growth in shopping as a leisure activity. And if you think about the cliches about the 1980s with the shop till you drop, conspicuous consumption, as well as the growth of a new breed of retail, which was the out-of-town shopping centre. There was a real focus on enterprise first, or a relaxation of planning rules. New shopping centres sprung up all over the place, and 25-year leases were common. So retailers who were in the 1980s and the 1990s, they really thought that bigger was better. They were happy to sign up to lots of stores. They were happy to keep increasing their store base because they saw the path to growth as being more and more physical stores. Big retailers were king. to the extent to which the Monopolies and Mergers Commission were actually investigating the impact of these big retail conglomerates on the smaller independents. Prices were low, they were still able to import goods from China at advantageous prices, and the demand was high. If we move into the 1990s, you can see that there was even more of an emphasis on this enterprise-first model. They removed restrictions from trading hours, although there was a growing sense that we'd perhaps gone too far with the out of town, and there were measures put into place to protect town centres for the first time. However, retailers kept on growing, they kept on opening new stores, and they continued to push small retailers out of business. And this path would have continued for much longer, no doubt. However, on the 5th of July 1994, a small startup opened in the US called Amazon. But the effect of Amazon wasn't felt for another few years. They started small. The proportion of sales being made online was absolutely tiny. The websites were clunky and difficult to use, and most people thought that online shopping was kind of a flight of fancy. Fast forward then into the early 2000s. The prevailing wisdom in retail was that if you wanted to grow, you should expand internationally, and you should also master multi-channel. So the concept of multi-channel retail had started to creep in. So people had started to realize that people would buy not just online, but in stores as well, and preferably across both. The effects of Amazon and other online startups were beginning to be felt, and people were beginning to get more comfortable with the idea of online shopping. In 2008, then we had the Lehman Brothers collapse, and that put the brakes on a lot of growth that retailers were experiencing. The ensuing economic crisis meant that customer demand weakened significantly, and many retailers found themselves struggling. And really, since 2008, there have continued to be a number of major factors that have impacted negatively these large industrial-sized retailers that grew up from the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. For example, in 2016, the referendum result that propelled us towards Brexit was another catastrophic effect on retail as it plunged the customer into their least favourite mood, which is uncertainty. Uncertainty always causes a drop in retail sales. Even in the run-up to a general election, you can see a negative impact on sales and demand because of political uncertainty. So Brexit was like that, but on steroids. And to be honest, even in 2020, we still don't really know what the impact of Brexit means. So it has had a long-term significant impact on consumer confidence. And what has been happening in those intervening years as well since 1994 when Amazon started? Well, the percentage of sales that take place online has been steadily growing. The coronavirus, clearly, with the need to shut all physical retail or all non-essential physical retail, has of course accelerated that trend even further. And currently, as it stands, 30.7% of all retail sales took place online in the last couple of months because of the coronavirus, although we'd already pipped over the 20% mark before that had happened. The UK has one of the highest percentages of online shopping of any country in the world, even compared to the US, for example, which is more like around 15% of all sales taking place online. So the UK has been one of the countries most impacted by online purchasing. And there has been a laundry list of other issues that have impacted the profitability of these big retail businesses. The living wage, for example, an important initiative to get more money for the lowest paid workers, has negatively impacted retailers who tend to have a high proportion of people on minimum wage. And then there are things like their legacy systems. So many of these retailers implemented large, clunky computer systems in the 80s and 90s, and it's very hard to replace them. On top of that, we've got an aging population. And as the population ages, there's a general overall lower spending per capita. Once retirement hits, many people's spending power decreases. Add to that a decade of stagnating wage growth, and you can see that times have been really difficult for big retailers. In fact, a large retailer CEO once said that 2017 in retail felt like you were walking up the down escalator. 2018 was like crawling on your knees up the down escalator backwards. And then 2019 and 2020 was like that, but with howling gales in your face as well. So what has changed in the retail industry? As I said, online retail is usually blamed for all of the current problems, the unstoppable rise of online-only Amazon, which is held up as the ultimate retail success story. So while it's true that e-commerce has grown hugely over the past decade, it's not the only reason for the current state of large retailers. For retail businesses, it's no longer the case that bigger is always better. So manufacturing goods halfway across the world and shipping them to the UK keeps getting more expensive. Energy, wages, and transport costs in China keep rising, and the pound is weak, making imports more costly. In fact, the Brexit vote made the pound drop significantly, and therefore products that were costing one price the day before the referendum were going up by 20 or 30% the day after the referendum, which was a huge blow to the profitability of large retailers. So the business rates changes and the living wage increases, and the price of doing business just kept getting more expensive. According to the British Retail Consortium, across large chains, their net profitability has fallen from 6 to 8% of sales pre-2007 to 3% today. So in other words, if you were a business that had £100 million worth of sales, pre-2007, you could have expected to make £6 to £8 million of profit. However, now a £100 million retailer would be lucky to make £3 million in profit. So even those with massive sales only make a tiny percentage of that back as profit. And that profit over time is shrinking. So you can see that it doesn't take much, just a small reduction in that profit to tip a business that was okay into a business that's in the red. So on top of that, these businesses have expensive, complicated, aging computer systems. They're no longer working for the modern reality of retail. Customers are expecting to be able to browse online, try things on in store, purchase from mobile devices, pick up packages from a location of their choosing. And a lot of these older systems just simply struggle to keep up with this everything, everywhere mindset. Replacing these systems costs millions and millions of pounds and causes huge disruption. Somebody once likened it to trying to change the engine in a 747 while it's in flight. So it's not really surprising when you look at this that most of the fastest growing UK retail companies are often younger companies with flexible systems and smaller costs. And you should count yourself lucky if you are somebody who has built your business on a platform with flexibility built in from the heart of it, such as Shopify. In fact, I've heard it said that with Shopify, you could build the same tech stack or the same types of technology that John Lewis has. You could achieve the same thing in about half an hour by adding on apps from the Shopify web store. And in fact, if anything, your system's probably going to work better than somebody like John Lewis's because it's all been made to hang together. So when you think about all of these headwinds, the only question that remains is how many of these big chains are going to be able to transform themselves into flexible modern organisations before they go the way of Debenhams or House of Fraser or Monsoon Accessorize, Warehouse or Oasis. One more pain point to focus on is the rise of fast-growing competition. And guess what? By that, I mean you, the creative product entrepreneurs. Think about this. It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts. For everybody who purchases a print from you instead of going to John Lewis, that's one more sale that the big retailers aren't making. You can see it with the demise of Mothercare. For every baby grow that you buy from a brand that you love on Instagram, that's one more baby grow you're not buying from Mothercare. And that is why it's important for you to realise that you're not separate from the retail industry. In fact, you're an important and growing part of it. So here's one more thing to consider as well when we talk about the demise of these big chains. And that's partly because there's been an increasing interest that people have in standing out. And this again is where independent retailers and brands are perfectly suited to meet the needs of a customer that wants personalised shopping. Personalised shopping, whether it's goods that are tailor-made for you or just that personal touch during your shopping experience, has become more and more important for today's customer. So you can imagine that during the time when people were happy to buy standardized products, it was possible to go to China, purchase hundreds of thousands of items at a rock bottom price, ship them overseas to the UK and sell them to customers who wanted to be the same as everybody else. But as soon as that demand starts fracturing, as soon as the customer base starts wanting things that are meant just for them, who want to have things that meet their values and their exact needs, it becomes harder and harder to do this sort of bulk buying, which will give you these standardized prices and these lower costs and help with the profitability. And so going back to where you fit in then. So boring retail is dead, not retail. It's no longer enough to put your stock out there and expect people to buy it. So there's a big shift in the way that people want to buy. They want to be excited. They want to have an experience when they go to the shops and buy. So experiential retail is a new buzzword. And guess what? Independent retailers and brands are perfectly placed to meet those demands, to be able to connect with the customers in a personal way and create something really special. You may be wondering then if there is still going to be a place for physical retail. We've talked lots about how people are shifting to purchasing online. However, I really believe that physical retail will continue to be a very important part of the customer journey. People talk about customers being channel agnostic. So what does that even mean? Well, channel agnostic means that people are no longer really thinking about online shopping versus offline shopping. They're just thinking about buying things. The customer journey has become really convoluted. It may be that you start off seeing something in a shop window, so then you investigate it online. Once you've seen that it's available online, you might purchase it to pick up in store. Or you might go to the store again to visit it, to do some more research before checking out more reviews online and purchasing to have it delivered to your home. It isn't really a situation where people are either buying online or they're buying offline. The two channels have become really intertwined, and the most forward-thinking retailers have really embraced that. So retailers are looking to have fewer but better stores. Some people refer to them as brand temples. So we'll see a continued reduction in retail space, but the big chains will still have stores, and they will look to make sure that those stores are the fullest expression of the brand that they can make it. What does that mean for our towns? Well, it's clear that there will be a reduction, as I said, in the number of large chains who will have presence in multiple towns across the UK. It used to be in the early 2000s that you needed to have 200 stores in order to reach 80% of the UK population. However, now it's suggested to reach the same number or the same percentage of the population, you only actually need 50 stores. So it's clear that when businesses are looking to cut back costs, they're going to be putting more money into fewer stores. However, in my head, that opens up the opportunity for all of those digitally native brands, in other words, brands who've started as selling online, to have the opportunity to have some physical space themselves. And if I were to be very optimistic, I would like to think we're going to see a return to more diverse high streets so that each high street will have its own character, and there will be a growth in the number of independent retailers, harkening back perhaps even to the 1940s and before. If you want any more proof of the continuing importance of physical retail, you only have to look at some of the biggest names in e-commerce, such as Depop or Glossier. Those are two major shopping brands who have built up online, but they are both looking at physical retail and the part that it can play. I think we also will see some more experimentation by large format retailers such as IKEA and their new smaller format stores that they've looked to put into urban areas. So I think, if anything, we're going to be seeing a mixture of different formats, different concepts in the physical retail space. And of course, we've got the huge growth in pop-ups. So 2012, Appear Here opened 80 shops. And in 2020, they were opening 300 a month in London alone. Now, clearly lockdown has ground to a halt a lot of the pop-up activity, but I believe once non-essential retail opens up again, we will start to see more pop-ups happening. It just goes to show the importance of the physical retail channel, even for stores that are online, and how things can work together really well. So what's going to happen to retail in the future? Well, what I find really fascinating is that there are two schools of thought when it comes to the future of retail, and I like to call this approach humans versus machines. So on the one hand, I believe that we're going to continue to see a huge growth in technology. So some of the retailers, the larger retailers who want to continue to have a competitive advantage, they are going to be looking at using technology as a way of leveraging this to drive improvements, drive down costs, and bring in new technology to help them to do that. One of the biggest impacts on retail in terms of technology has been artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence goes hand in hand with big data. So big data refers to the volume of data that is currently being collected. So prior to even really 3 or 4 years ago, we just didn't have enough data to power artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence works by taking in data and using it to mimic the human thought process. You may well have heard about algorithms. So algorithms are just a way of talking about the steps that you go through to do something. It's almost like a recipe, if you like. So in the last 2 years, 90% of all the data that exists now was created, which is huge. If you think about that, it just means that there's this volume of data coming in that retailers just simply didn't have access to. So artificial intelligence has a huge, long list of applications that retailers are looking at. For example, recommendations. When you go onto Netflix or onto Amazon and it suggests that you might have a look at certain items, that is all powered by artificial intelligence. There's also computer vision. So computer vision is all about understanding the physical store in a way that we've just never been able to do before. So looking at things like heat mapping, where retailers can understand how people move around a store. There's also computer vision that allows you to understand the demographics of who's coming into your store by analysing camera data and visual face recognition. Then there's also huge application in things like virtual fit and style suggestions. So one of the biggest problems that plagues online retail has been the idea of returns. So trying to get people to reduce the number of returns they make by improving the suggestions and helping them understand how a garment fits before they get it home. Customer service via chatbots, that's another application of artificial intelligence. And also bigger retailers will be looking to do things like sentiment analysis. So that is looking at the kind of messages they're receiving on social media or via their emails and understanding how customers are actually feeling. There's also a huge application in terms of stock forecasting and replenishment. You'd like to think that these big retailers are really quite advanced in this technology, but believe me, a lot of this stuff is still being run off Excel spreadsheets. So there is a huge amount that can happen in the future in terms of getting better stock forecasting and replenishment set up. And then also facial recognition comes in for payment, so preventing fraud, and also for in-store security. So I think that the big retailers are going to be doing a lot of work in growing their technology, and we will see some real developments over time in artificial intelligence. On top of all of that as well, there's also other technologies such as augmented reality. So this is already available to you, that some retailers will allow you to superimpose a photo or an image of a product into your home using your camera so that you can understand how it will fit. So Goldman Sachs is forecasting that the market for augmented reality and virtual reality in retail will reach $1.6 billion in 2025. So virtual reality is more immersive. That's when you're putting the customer into a new environment. So behind the wheel of a car. China, for example, has had some virtual reality stores where you could actually walk around a mock-up of a department store and look to purchase. And the other piece of technology, which I think will have a huge impact on retail, is the last mile technologies. So that's all the stuff like drones and robots. The last mile basically is the final part of the delivery journey for any online retailer or delivery company. That is usually the most expensive. So they're often trying to work out ways to cut their costs for their last mile delivery. McKinsey predicts that 80% of last mile delivery will be coming from autonomous vehicles within 10 years. The coronavirus has had a major accelerating impact on this last mile technologies. All of a sudden, businesses have been dealing with far higher levels of volumes of deliveries that they've had to do. Plus, they've been looking at ways to protect their workforce and reduce the strain on their actual human delivery workforce. So interest in last mile technologies has spiked massively during the coronavirus. And there are even driverless stores that come to you. In Japan, for example, there is a driverless pharmacy that if you summon it, it will come and you'll be able to unlock the door and go in and shop using either a card that identifies you or facial recognition technology. So there's lots going on in terms of retail technology, and a lot of the big retailers are focusing their efforts onto that. But what I find really fascinating about the idea of this retail technology, as much as it's really interesting when you think about all of these things that they can do with robots, you may be wondering, well, what impact does that have on me? What springs to mind with the technology piece is that some of these advances in terms of things like artificial intelligence, chatbots in particular, or recommendations, those will be filtering down. So platforms like Shopify that are allowing small creative businesses to trade online for the first time, some of them will be busily trying to get that technology filtered down and out to a wider audience, not just to these larger retailers. So no doubt you yourself will be able to benefit from some of this technology as it improves. The other thing that's interesting about this technology is a lot of what the retailers are trying to achieve is they're trying to personalize their interaction with shoppers. Now, if you've got hundreds of thousands of customers, it's very difficult for you to create a personalized experience. And much of the artificial intelligence, much of the applications that people are working on for artificial intelligence is all about creating personalized recommendations for customers, personalized messages that are sent out to them, personalizing their email marketing, for example, or what they're seeing on social media so that they feel like it's tailored to them. And that brings me to the other element of the future of retail. As I said, it is often that human versus robots. And I think the other thing that is really going to drive the future of retail then is that need for the personal human touch. A lot of retailers are trying to create that through their use of technology, but this is where you as an independent creative retailer will really come to the forefront. You can have that personal touch. You can have that personal relationship with your customer because you actually know them. So what does that look like? What does the human-based future of retail look like? Well, if the machines-based is all about using technology to connect with the customer, then the humans-based is all about relating to your customer, one human to another, and explaining your values. So values-based retail, or people purchasing because they want to buy something that fits with their beliefs, has been a huge impact on the retail industry, especially in the last couple of years. People want to be part of something, they want to be part of a community, and conscious consumerism, where people are very concerned about where the products they've purchased are coming from and how they're made, has been a major impact on the retail industry. You can also see this in the way that social media is still a critical tool for small businesses reaching out to their customers, but it's no longer about being a broadcast channel. It's about actually really engaging with your customers. And I think we'll see that continue to grow into social commerce. So you can see that Instagram and Facebook, for example, are betting that people are going to want to shop more and more through their social media channels. And I think that from a human perspective, small businesses are going to more and more be working to sell to their customers in a social way through channels where they've gathered together communities of people who share their values. Conscious consumerism, sustainability, whether that's focusing on ocean plastics or environmental impact or on the supply chain, they are going to continue to be really important. And now, as baby boomers move out of being the main economic group and the new generation Z are coming to the forefront, they are very interested in ethical considerations. So the fact that the bulk of the money will be being spent by Generation Z and millennials in the next couple of decades will have a profound impact on how people purchase products and the kind of things that they buy. What I wanted to really highlight with this episode was the challenges that are facing legacy retailers are the result of decades of change. It's not something that's happened overnight. And the way that those retailers are going to respond to these challenges is really about building human connection, but using technology a lot of the time to really leverage that human connection and reduce their costs. What does that mean for you as a small independent retailer? Well, it means that you will benefit from some of these technological advances, and it's worth just keeping your eyes open and keep aware of what you can now access, even if it's in a small way for you and your business. But then also just be aware that this personal connection that you've got with your customers is something that retailers, those big retailers, would really absolutely love to have. They would love to be able to connect with their customers in the way that you can connect with your customers. They would love to have that personal relationship that you have. They would love to be able to just reach out and ask their audience for input in the way that you can do that. So if you feel like you're not part of the future of retail, I'm just here to remind you that you absolutely 100% are. And I, for one, feel really excited and optimistic about this vision of there being more independent brands and more independent retailers who can connect with their customers, who can create these great experiences because they're doing it with one human to another. And what's more, you are only going to become a bigger and bigger part of the retail industry because you've already made those connections with your customers. You've already thought about your brand values and your brand story and started sharing it with your customers. And you are already able to create that personalized experience just simply through your personal touch. And when you see those stories in the news about the big retailers who are failing, don't forget that this is, as I said, the result of decades of change and business models that haven't been able to adapt. Instead, think about how you can be part of this new economy and take your place as part of the future of retail. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, do follow me on Instagram at Future Retail UK and tag me where you are listening. I would love to see where you are when you're tuning in. Please also rate, review and subscribe to hear about new episodes as they are released. And I'd also love you to just tell me, what do you think the future of the retail industry holds and how do you see yourself being part of it? If you've enjoyed this week's episode, then I invite you to check out resilientretail.com. The Resilient Retail Club is the membership for anyone wanting to start, grow, or scale a profitable product business. No more trawling Google trying to find the answers to your questions or wading through general business advice that speaks mainly to service-based businesses. Whether you're still at the idea stage or you've been going for a while but want to get more focused and organised when it comes to your business, the Resilient Retail Club is the place for you. With a library of courses tailored to creative product businesses, several live sessions a month, and a supportive and active community, the Resilient Retail Club is the perfect membership to help you hit your goals faster. Check it out at resilientretail.com.